The method that I use to overcome porn addiction is based in something called rational emotive behavioural therapy. The concept is that your thoughts create your feelings and your feelings create your actions. So if we want different actions in our life, if we want different outcomes, then what we need to focus on is changing the way that we think about things so we can feel a different way and therefore act in a more rational way as well. And this was created by a guy called Albert Ellis in the mid 1950s. Mary Porlis, who's my business partner and actually passed the Beyond Compulsion method onto me, like she taught me this and we worked together, she actually was taught the Beyond Compulsion method by someone called Patricia. And Patricia actually wrote a book which is endorsed by Albert Ellis. So it's all kind of connected to the Beyond Compulsion method in this sort of roundabout way, right? So the problem we have with porn addiction right now is there's all these really strange, to be honest, these strange, unhealthy subcultures. And I was very much into this world in the past. You know, I'd go into the NoFap forums, I'd have these different like NoFap apps, and I was really interested in porn addiction, semen retention, and at times No Nut November as well. But the problem in these really unhealthy subcultures that are really just, you know, guys out there on the internet trying to solve this porn addiction problem. The problem with these communities is a lot of them are full of what we call junky thoughts, so irrational thinking patterns, and that's completely natural because when you have a porn addiction, you are going to have irrational thinking patterns. You know I did for over 10 years. And the problem is that people misunderstand this problem. They misunderstand the problem of porn addiction. A lot of people think it's to do with maybe sexual desires and just like urges and like it's all kind of messed up into like, you know, people talk about sexual templates and sexuality and all of this kind of stuff. But to me, it's really about, well, how do you think and do you have a way to deal with that moment when you actually do have the compulsive desire? And the compulsive desire may be for porn, but it may also be to scroll on your phone. It may be to watch excessive amounts of YouTube. It may be to overeat. To me, compulsive desire and this problem of porn addiction is a lot more to do with, well, what's going on in your minds? What rationalizations, excuses, justifications do you have to engage in a problematic behavior? A behavior that you probably simultaneously want to stop, but you also want to engage in. Okay, so there's a big misunderstanding going on in the sort of porn addiction world. Our solution, the Beyond Compulsion method, really focuses on, okay, well, let's help people change their own thinking. For example, you know, you may have the thought like, I don't want to watch porn, but then you end up watching porn, so clearly you do want to watch porn, so we need to start getting people connected to that desire and think through the reality that they do want to engage in that behavior and experiencing that desire, and then not actually act on that desire and think it all the way through and make a rational choice so that repeatedly over time they can change their neural pathways. That's what we do here at the Beyond Compulsion Academy. But what people are doing and where people are going wrong is they're getting this whole problem sort of mixed into the world of self-improvement, willpower, discipline, but it doesn't work. And one of the main reasons willpower doesn't work is because often people feel like they can't watch porn. And so there's this resistance, this inner battle going on, and it feels very, you know, frustrating. You may feel agitated and you may tell yourself, you know, I'm on NoFap right now, so I can't watch porn. You know, I want to preserve my streak. And this is the way I used to think in the past before I met Mary Portis. And the problem is that a lot of these strategies when it comes to porn addiction recovery, they're focusing on the streaks, they're focusing on substituting the porn out for maybe going to the gym or meditating or journaling, and then they're focused on avoiding the triggers, installing blockers. But none of these strategies here actually change the thought patterns. And what's going on in the mind is that the neurons that are firing together are wiring together. And so you keep on relapsing, and then you're trying to change these external things like maybe your environment, or you're putting a new blocker in place, or you start going to the gym a bit more, but your mind is still filled with the same sort of thought patterns that have led to you relapsing. And so you go on a new streak, and then you relapse again, and then you maybe change your environment again, and then you relapse again, and you end up just stuck in this cycle of relapsing over and over and over. And then these YouTubers who are also doing NoFap and are actually really in the addiction, but maybe are going on longer streaks by managing it and controlling their addiction, they're then telling you, okay, well, relapsing is fine, don't worry about it, you just got to sort of iteratively reduce the frequency of the times you engage, but that doesn't work because every time you relapse, you're actually strengthening those addictive neural pathways because you're just wiring those neurons together again. Okay. So a lot of people believe, and this is definitely what I believed in the past, that they're making progress because maybe their streaks are getting longer. But the truth is, the only way to really make progress with all of this is to actually change the neural pathways. And to do that, what we need to do is deal with those moments of compulsive desire in a rational way, many, many consecutive times. Rationally, thinking through that choice. You have the desire, you get connected to it, you think it through rationally, and you actually change the mind, like you change what's going on in your mind. And what happens is over time you build up this confidence, this self-belief, this trust that actually I can have these desires and I don't have to be a slave to them. I don't have to act on them. And time passes on and on and on. And as you really, really reinforce new ways of thinking and you start to, correlate in your minds, like if I watch porn, I feel shame, I feel terrible, I feel weak, I feel exhausted, I feel frustrated with myself, I can't show up to work without, looking at people and feeling like they can see what I've done. You really get that clear in your mind, and over time, porn becomes a lot less attractive. It's not to say you're never going to have that compulsive desire again, you might do, but you're going to have that sort of stability and that calmness to deal with it in a rational way if you have a very specific tool to think through that choice in a rational way. So going back to rational emotive behavioural therapy, let's just compare this approach to a few other sort of ways of doing things, some of the more traditional, popular approaches. So most people, they're using streaks, they're installing blockers, maybe they're using self-improvement. But, some of these things, they may be useful for other areas of your life. Self-improvement may be good for your general personal development, but does it actually deal with that part of your mind, the addicted part of the mind, that part of you which does want to engage in this behaviour? Well, not really, because you could go to the gym for 2 hours and then you go home and you've still got this desire and it's like, well, what are you going to do now? Or you wake up at 3 a.m. and you've got this really strong compulsive desire. The self-improvement's probably not going to be that useful in that moment. And the blockers, the streaks, the problem with them is they don't change the thought patterns. And because they're not changing your thought patterns, you're just going to be left with this desire over and over and over. And so you go on a streak and then your thoughts haven't actually changed. And eventually you get to maybe day 92 and it's been so long, it doesn't really matter anymore, I'm good, I'm free. You have all these irrational thought patterns and you go ahead and you relapse and you're back in the addiction and you're like, oh shit, where's my freedom gone? And you feel pretty terrible. The blockers are just very disempowering as well because they're not actually changing your thoughts in any way at all. They're just reinforcing helplessness and making you feel even more like you can't trust yourself. Because if you could fully trust yourself, why would you have a blocker in place? It just doesn't make any rational sense at all. So rational emotive behavioural therapy is actually a very useful way to start changing the way you think, so you can start shifting some of these irrational thought patterns that come from the addictive part of the mind into more rational ones. And you can start to put the rational part of the mind back in control. Is it effective for dealing with porn addiction? Well, I think it's a really good way to start to change the way you think, and so it could be useful. But to be very honest, I don't know because I don't have a rational emotive behavioural therapist myself. Like, it's not something that I completely use because what I use is a little bit different. It's the Beyond Compulsion method. So what we've built is a method that's built in the rational emotive behavioural therapy. So we're really focused on changing the thought patterns, but we have a really clear understanding of compulsive desire in particular. So certain thoughts which really require change, and we really focus on that moment when that part of the mind's very active. And so you're going to have thoughts like, once won't hurt. And we would use a very specific tool, which we call the 5-fact script, to think through that truth. Like, what is the truth? What's the counter to that? Well, the truth is, once will really hurt. Like, if you engage just one time, that's what wires the addictive neural pathways again, keeps you stuck in the addiction. Other examples are, people tell themselves, I don't want to watch porn. We're like, well, actually, you do want to watch porn and there's nothing wrong with you for that. It's just these neural pathways wired in a certain way. People tell themselves, I can't watch porn because maybe they're on nofap or it upsets their partner, or I can't watch porn because it just makes me feel so weak and exhausted and frustrated. Again, the script counters that. It's like, well, actually, you can watch porn. You're never going to be deprived of it. It's always going to be there available. It's just, here's the reality. Here's the consequences. consequences. Yes, you can do it. That doesn't mean it's going to be okay with you. The consequences are severe. One of the biggest consequences is you're going to be back in the addiction because it's engaging in the behaviour which creates the desire to engage again, right? So our method is kind of like we've got this full education on the addictive part of the mind, these different parts going on, the irrational thought patterns, and then we've built a very specific script for that moment when you have the desire to kind of use the REBT to sort of think through that choice in that specific moment, so you can start to disconnect and change these neural pathways and actually think through the choice in a rational way and therefore move on with your life without engaging in this behaviour anymore. Hopefully that makes some sense. If you take one thing away from this, I would say start to shift your approach from, instead of like just trying to change your action all the time, so like change maybe going to the gym or whatever, into starting to consider your thought patterns instead. You know, what's going on in your minds, because that's what's leading to relapsing. It's not about discipline, it's not about willpower, it's not really about your sexual desires that much either. It's about the thoughts going on. All right. Hopefully this is useful. If you would like to learn the Beyond Compulsion method like myself, then I'll leave a link in the description below so you can take a look inside the Beyond Compulsion Academy. Cheers, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.